I'm Moil, Rabbi Adam Epstein. Stay tuned. Taped with Rabbi Doug is next.
We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug on your TV tonight.
But Daddy, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Forget about Monday Night Football. There's no other thing we're going to watch on Monday but Rabbi Doug.
Yeah, Rabbi Doug on TV tonight. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. Oh, everybody talk about Doug.
Shalom and welcome to Taped with Rabbi Doug. My guest today is someone I've known for a few years now. Came to the Chicago area a few years ago, and he is a Moil, Rabbi Adam Epstein. Baruch haba.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Adam, you are a rabbi who specifically is an expert at Brit Mila, at ritual circumcision. So I want to talk a little bit about this. The Torah commandment to circumcise a Jewish baby boy at 8 days old comes from the book of Genesis, from Breshit. Of course, the first baby that was circumcised at 8 days old was Isaac, Yitzchak, by Abraham, his father. And the tradition has been for all these centuries to be in the covenant of Abraham, to do a circumcision at 8 days old of a baby boy. I want to know, first of all, if you can tell us, what is the difference between being circumcised in a hospital and being circumcised on the 8th day by a Moil, according to Jewish tradition?
That's a great question. There's unfortunately some misconceptions in this area, but there are a lot of differences, which is what makes using a Moil a kosher bris versus doing it in the hospital, which could be a kosher bris, but most likely is not.
Because people aren't in the hospital normally for 8 days.
Exactly. So in the old days, in fact, maybe even like 100 years ago, or less, 80 years ago, 60 years ago, there were people who would stay in the hospital for 8 days. In fact, in New York, when my father was a baby, all the boys in Oslo got circumcised by an actual Orthodox Moil who came to the hospital on the 8th day. But nowadays, that doesn't happen. So first of all, there's an issue at the time that a person is supposed to be have the bris actually during the daytime, and also it's supposed to be on the 8th day. So either one or both of these might not happen in a hospital. In a hospital, it could happen on any day, usually on day 2, or sometimes 1, and it could happen at night. While the mother's sleeping, they'll say, we'll schedule the circumcision for the baby.
Now, if a baby is circumcised on the 2nd day, it's not a Brit Mila. He has not entered the covenant of Abraham according to tradition. Isn't that correct?
Correct. That is correct. And he would need what is known as a hatafas dam bris, where we would take a drop of blood from the
area where the actual circumcision would take place, or had taken place.
Yeah, we would do that on the 8th day in order to rectify that.
And if you didn't do it by the 8th day, you could actually do it any time afterwards.
Yes, true. In fact, there are times where we would postpone a bris.
A baby's sick, jaundice.
Right, for example, if a baby's sick.
A preemie who's not healthy enough to have that type of surgery.
Right. There's many reasons why we might delay the bris, and as long as it's performed, the minimum is the 8th day. It can't be done before the 8th day, and the 8th day means 8th day from when the baby was born. So if the baby's born on a Sunday, the bris would be the next Sunday, but it could be any time.
On the 8th day of the child's life.
Right, and it could be, so for example, the baby is born late at night, you can, as long as it's the 8th day, you can do it any time on the 8th day.
And even if the baby was born before midnight, it would actually be on the calendar on the 9th day, because it's after sunset, correct? Because after dark.
Right, that's right. We do 8 days according to the Jewish calendar.
Which starts after sunset for the next day, counts for the next day.
That's right.
So let me ask you a question about adults. Looking back at Soviet Russia, where circumcision, ritual circumcision was not done by many people because of fear of the Soviet government and so on. So these adults who came to Israel or came to the United States and wanted to enter the covenant of Abraham, they had to go with a moil into the hospital for surgery, is that correct?
Yes, either in a hospital or in a clinic setting. And yeah, there were thousands of Russian immigrants.
Adult circumcisions.
Yes, from all ages, from 5-year-old boys up to men in their 80s. And these special Jews, their whole life, knew that they were Jewish and knew that a Jewish person, a Jewish male, is supposed to be circumcised, have a bris, and they eagerly awaited the time where they would be able to actually get it done.
I want to go away from this subject for a minute and come back to it certainly because this is so interesting. Tell me, how does one become certified as a moil? Because obviously you can't just go and observe a couple of people and then start doing a Brit Mila. You must have to have hospital certification, licensing, probably, I'm guessing, malpractice insurance if something, God forbid, should happen, that something doesn't go right. How do you become certified and how do you, once you become certified, start doing circumcisions yourself as a moil?
So it's a great question. It actually, it depends on the country. You know, some countries like England, for example, have a very old, multiple centuries old board of Moilim that one must be certified through. Then you have in Eretz Yisrael, you have also, and here in America, there is actually an American board of ritual circumcision through which I am certified. But, you know, it's, you know, for example, the famous joke, my father was a doctor, and the famous joke is that in medical school they say, you know, watch one, do one, teach one. That's how they train people to do surgery. For us, it's not like that at all. It's more that a teacher has to, just like many other things, like shechita or safras, right?
Which would be ritual slaughtering for kosher animals,
right.
And writing as a scribe for a Torah scroll or mezuzahs or tefillin.
Right. So for these things, you know, when it's an apprenticeship where when a teacher feels that his student is capable, then he will write him a certification. So I followed a moil around for 3 years. Every single day, I would go watch. I watched probably thousands of circumcisions before I even attempted my own. And then once a person has proven themselves, there are various boards here in America, for example, or worldwide, that will give an official certification. In terms of hospitals, that depends on the city. So for example, in New York, the Moilim that go into the hospitals have special licenses. Here in the Midwest, it's really based on the doctor. You know, the doctor has the right to allow someone, a Moil, to come into the operating room and to perform circumcision.
How interesting, how interesting. So once you're certified and you're doing circumcisions, you have to obviously purchase a lot of items. A ritual circumcision is not just holding the foreskin and using a scalpel. I mean, it's a very, very technical process, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. You know, we have, first of all, Moilim nowadays, every single piece of equipment they use is sterilized, hospital grade sterilized. So I have my own autoclave, which means, you know, so that's a big piece of equipment. And on top of that, we have various pieces of equipment. The main piece that I like to show is, this is the traditional knife of a moil. It's called an ismil. It has an interesting shape to it. It's double-edged. Cheref pifios. That's based on a medrash.
And is it similar to a scalpel?
Well, in that it's razor sharp. Yes. Now, So this is like what a Moil would have used for the last few centuries. Something very similar to this. This is a very old knife that I have more as sentimental purposes. Now, because I do circumcisions in all sorts of settings, hospitals, and I also travel a lot, for me it's more practical actually. There's a company in England that will make the same double-edged Moil knife, but in a completely hospital sterilized, custom-made package. So I carry these. This is also disposable. So for me, it's just
one-time use.
One-time use, yeah. And so it's just more practical for me, and it's completely 100% kosher. It's a surgical grade scalpel, but it also fulfills the requirements that a Moil needs. On top of that, the second piece of equipment that a Moil will use is called a mogen, which means shield. And I shouldn't have to explain what we're shielding, but this is to make sure that only the foreskin is removed and nothing else.
So this separates the foreskin from the rest.
It basically just creates a barrier so that everything underneath the foreskin is not touched by the knife. So this is a traditional Moil will have this. There are also pieces of equipment that aren't traditional that are used by either doctors or Moilim that might not be doing brism in the traditional way, and that's what I have here.
Could you show us this? I'm interested. And using this for a bris would not make it a kosher bris?
No, according to almost every opinion, these are not kosher. These are called clamps. I'll start with the older clamp. This is called the Gampo Clamp. It's been around for at least 100 years.
You're saying doctors use these?
Yes, doctors use this. There's many. This is the first, I think one of the first circumcision clamps that was ever invented. They come in different sizes, and there are nowadays there are many different varieties of devices used to perform circumcisions, but they're not kosher, and for the main reason is one of the requirements for the bris to be kosher is that there should be Brit Mila, that there should actually be bleeding, but obviously it doesn't have to be
just drops of blood even.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be anything major, just a drop of blood. These clamps are designed because in the medical profession, I'm an EMT, so I work in the hospitals, and one of the things in the medical profession when it comes to children and babies in general is they have a philosophy that when the baby leaves their care, they don't trust the parents. So when they give the baby to the parents to take home, they don't want any chance of bleeding that the parents have to deal with. They want to make sure when the baby leaves, everything is completely finished. So that's why these clamps were invented, is that a circumcision could be performed without any bleeding. The problem with these clamps, I'm sure if you just look at the thing, is it looks like a medieval torture device. So it's actually extraordinarily painful. So therefore, the reason doctors use it only with lidocaine and injection, which is itself very painful. The way this works is the bris area is placed here, and the foreskin is protracted over this area, and then the scalpel is used to remove the foreskin. Now this clamp is a little bit more controversial. Now if you look,
it's similar in one way.
It looks almost identical to the traditional Moil shield. This is called a mogen, a shield. This is called a mogen clamp. A clamp it's the shield clamp. It looks like a shield, but it is in fact a clamp. And the reason you know it's a clamp is because it completely shuts, almost like a cigar cutter, and a lever is put on to apply pressure.
So it's completely separated before you cut.
The foreskin is completely killed off, all the cells of the skin, and therefore it's basically dead skin that's just cut off.
And that is not kosher.
No, according to the
most opinions,
the vast majority of Orthodox Moilim and Rabbanim, this is not kosher. Unfortunately, this is being used by many Moilim. Maybe not in the Orthodox circles, but when it comes to Moil traveling or going somewhere else, they might use this. And the reason is that they don't want to deal with bleeding. Unfortunately, it's a hard thing to deal with, which is why a person, when choosing a Moil, must pick someone who's had proper training and spend several years training and watching and learning. Just like when you pick a doctor, that just because a person went to medical school doesn't make them a great doctor. There's good doctors and there's maybe not so good doctors. So it's the same with a Moil. You pick someone who is very skilled, and I myself travel all over, and I never have used a clamp ever, and I'm not worried about a little bleeding because I actually use, and not just myself, but many Moilim, especially the younger Moilim nowadays, are really, we research new bandage technology. One bandage that's very popular, I'll show it, is called Quick Clot. It's actually being used, it's used by the military and police. There's many different things that have found to be stop bleeding. What I did though is I actually have a patent now for a bandage where I took this technology, which is designed really for stopping bullet holes, for example, or trauma, like penetrating traumas. And I actually put the main ingredient onto a stretch gauze that is perfect for wrapping around that Moilim use, and it stops bleeding instantly. And the reason I share this is, for me, this is not a business. I'm not here to promote myself. I really want every Moil to have this technology that they won't need to use clamps like this, and that they're not worried about a little bit of bleeding.
So, after the circumcision takes place, the Moil says a blessing, the father of the baby says a blessing, then come the two blessings, the two paragraphs that are said with a cup of wine after the Brit Mila got from prayer over the wine, including the naming of the baby. So when someone comes along and says, well, my doctor is Jewish, my doctor reads Hebrew perfectly, my doctor is Reformed, but he calls himself a Reformed Moil, so we're having him do the circumcision on the 8th day, and he's coming and he's going to say the prayers. Isn't that acceptable, Rabbi?
Right.
Can you tell me what the issues are with that?
It's interesting. I had the very same phone call this week. I had a story. Every Moil has a lot of stories. So here, the parents are having trouble conceiving a child for many years. They went to a doctor who specialized in this, who happened to also be an OB-GYN, and he not only helped them conceive with Hashem's help, he also delivered the baby, and lo and behold, it was a boy, and he said he also does circumcisions, and he's a Moil, he's willing then to come back to the hospital on the 8th day. Of course, it seems like a deal too good to be true. So when they spoke to their rabbi, who was an Orthodox rabbi, and he said he can't attend the circumcision because it's not going to be a kosher bris. So they were a little upset, and the rabbi called me and asked me, if I would be willing to come later. Well, first to come later and just do the toughest down bris, to after they do the thing, to just do the correction, take the drop of blood on the later in the week. So I said, let me speak to them. Let me talk to them. So we spoke to them. The first thing I told them was like this. First thing I said is that this for me, I do this as a mitzvah. This is a mitzvah that God gave us, the Jewish people. There's no charge whatsoever. I don't take money. I'm not here to, say I'm better than the doctors. I'm not here to say that we know better than the doctors. Obviously, doctors spend years in school. They're very well-trained individuals. For what they do medically, they do very well. Okay? They know how to perform circumcision according to the standards, the medical standards. I say, but we have been performing circumcisions for thousands of years, before it was a medical procedure, before any doctor ever considered it to be something that even a doctor should do. And we have our own requirements on top of what the doctors do. That there is a certain way that make it kosher. And on top of that, ours happens to be less invasive. There's no injections, we don't use clamps, which, you know, again, in the hospital setting, this is what they need to do for their insurance and their reasons. But for us, this is not what we do. And then I also explained to them that, in fact, there are many spiritual benefits to a circumcision, to a kosher bris, done in the kosher way. That's mentioned in countless books of Kabbalistic teachings. It's a blessing for the baby. It's a blessing for the parents. It's a blessing that the child should grow up with good midas, should be a refined individual. So, you know, there's
we say, you remind me of those famous words we say, which are part of the ceremony, Kashem shenichnas labris, ken yekanis l'torah l'chuppah l'masim tovim, that just like he's entering this covenant properly, with this Brit Mila, so he should grow up in the study of Torah. He should be a person who does good deeds and helps society, and he should go under the chuppah with a Jewish bride someday.
That's right.
It's a beautiful blessing.
Right, and speaking about Jewish bride, in fact, it says that a kosher bris is a shmira on the bris, that it ensures that the person, hopefully will marry a Jewish woman. So it's a very important thing spiritually. And then even physically, I get calls every week from non-Jewish people asking me to do circumcisions for them because they want the pain-free method. And they also heard my bandaging techniques, which is made out of a natural clay called kaolin, which stops bleeding instantly. And they want the natural, less pain-free, less invasive method. Unfortunately, for them, I have never performed a circumcision on a non-Jew, which is an interesting fact because that's how a lot of Moil throughout the world train.
I want to go into some of the rituals. We put the baby on a chair, on a pillow of Elijah the prophet. What's the reason we invite Elijah the prophet to be at the circumcision, at the Brit Mila, before the ceremony actually takes place?
That's a great question. So, as we know, Elijah was a prophet, and in ancient times, what was the main job of a prophet? They would receive prophecy, but what would they do with the prophecy? What was their
Share it
purpose?
with the people.
Right, their main job was to direct the people to live a more appropriate spiritual Jewish life. And part of it would be to chastise people that maybe weren't doing necessarily the right thing. So one of the things that happened was Elijah, as great of a prophet as he was, as special of a person and as holy of a man he was, he said to Hashem that look at your Jewish people, how they're misbehaving, and he criticized the Jewish people in front of Hashem. So as the story goes, Hashem said to Elijah that you're criticizing the Jewish people. Look, every mother takes her young baby at 8 days and allows him to be circumcised. And was for her, it's like complete Mesiras Nefesh. It's like almost she'd rather
sacrificing.
She'd rather give up her own life.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, now you need to go to every bris, and as it says in certain books, that he's called the Malach HaBris, the angel of the bris.
God told Elijah to do this.
Yeah, that he now comes to every circumcision as a witness, and he gives blessings and aid, and so we reserve a chair for him to be there.
As a spiritual guest.
Right.
Beautiful. Just like we invite guests to the sukkah and Sukkot, spiritual guests with us. It's a beautiful thing. So I want to go into one of the most controversial parts of the circumcision ritual called mitzitza. This is the drawing of blood using the breath of the Moil Most Moilim use a tube with a cotton in it to prevent any diseases. In the olden days, and even in some traditions still, he actually uses his mouth. What is the tradition of Metzitza? We know that there's blood there already, so we're not drawing blood that wasn't there. What is that tradition, and why is it done?
So it's. I was hoping you asked this. It's. So basically, it's mentioned even in the Talmud that this custom where the Moil would draw the blood with his mouth. It seems like the main reason is that the area itself is not one of the cleanest areas in general, and also the bris area is not like a finger. When a bone or an area with a stiffness to it bleeds, it's very easy to heal. The skin closes nicely. That area is not like that. The skin is folded on top of each other, and it is possible that the blood is congealing, mixing with maybe things that aren't necessarily clean. So, at least from my research, I think that the origin of this was to draw out the blood that might have been infected, to draw it out and to then immediately cover it with a bandage. It also says that a Moil must draw blood from the far places of the body. So it seems that it has also some other healing aspects to it.
Very, very interesting.
Now, in terms of using a tube or not, yes, this was controversial because of reported cases of the spreading of herpes to certain babies. Mm-hmm. So, we see that, first of all, throughout Jewish history, there have been diseases, and many diseases even worse than herpes. In Yerushalayim, 100 years ago, there was tuberculosis. There's been syphilis. And yet we see that this procedure was done as well. The whole circumcision procedure was done, with a knife and drawing the blood and all of these things, and not with the hospital-grade sterilization that we have today. And yet there's no reports. And trust me, the enemies of the Jewish people were very interested in finding negative reports to report. And we see throughout the whole history there was never widespread sickness from the entire bris ceremony. And obviously the main reason is because Hashem protects us. And when we do a mitzvah, we get a certain protection from Hashem. And unless there is good cause, then we consider making changes. Yet we see that when we do a 100% kosher bris, that there's Hashem protects us. We have protection.
It's beautiful, beautiful. I can't thank you enough for being on the show and sharing this with us. I want to thank you so much, Rabbi Moil, Adam Epstein, for being on the show. I want to thank all of you for being with us. Remember, you can check out our website, www.tvrabbi.com, where you can also see former shows on the web. If you want to email us or email Rabbi Epstein, I will be happy to forward it to him, and I know he'll get back to you. The email address is info@tvrabbi.com. Thanks again for being on the show.
Yeah.
I wish you much hatzlacha, success in your continued career and doing this great mitzvah for Jewish babies and their families, and hope to see you next time right here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. Shalom, everyone.
Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug on the TV tonight.
This has been a Taped with Rabbi Doug production.